What's up, guys? My name is Red, and this is Storytime with Cullen Chung. Let's see. I started getting into cars maybe when I was probably like 16 years old. I watched the very first Fast and the Furious movie, and like any other kid during that time, probably thought it was like a really cool thing. What really set the deal for me was my uncle that moved here from Australia showed up at my house, and he had this beat-up car with a big spoiler on it. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but it actually ended up being a 1993 Mazda RX7, which was Dominic Toretto's main car in the Fast and the Furious, the very first one. Since then, I kind of already knew that that was going to be the car that I wanted for myself. It wasn't until I was probably about, I don't know, maybe 24 years old that I actually got the chance to own one. It was 1993 also. Standard edition, no wing, completely clean, had 36,000 miles on it, and it was probably the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. A few years down, I did a little bit of modifications to it. I believe one of the things that I did was a HKS exhaust. I had it on some K-Sport coilovers and some work VSXXs. A big thing for me when it came to the car community was the people that I met. I met a lot of people. Cullen, of course, was one of them. Me and him actually had a crew back then that was called, what was it? I think it was called Top Line or something. I forget what it is, but we started a crew with a bunch of our friends from Canada out here in Seattle. And that's how I started meeting a lot more people and getting into the scene and actually really starting to enjoy myself. Fast forward to now, we'll just really say that a lot of stuff happened in between that time that I owned the RX-7 and what I'm doing right now. That RX-7 was my dream car. It was the car that I wanted from the very first, the very first time I seen it. I didn't want a Lamborghini or a Mercedes or something crazy like most people do, something expensive. Not saying that an FD is expensive. It is expensive for what it is, honestly. But it was just one of those cars that I really wanted. The lines on it were really sleek. The look of it is very futuristic for the time that it was in the 90s. And I just really, really fell in love with that car. I've owned it for about 5 years before I ended up getting rid of it, selling it. I probably went through about 2 to 3 motors on it. The first time that it blew was kind of my fault. I didn't really know too much about rotaries at that time, so I kind of just drove it like I stole it, pretty much. That's the saying goes. The second motor ended up getting built, and it was kind of just a bad luck type of thing. I was on my way to actually break in the engine and hopefully get it tuned after it's been broken in, and ended up blowing a seal on the on-ramp on I-5. The car sat maybe for about a year or two before I made the very difficult decision of letting it go and selling it. It was one of those things where, you've just dealt with a car for so long. It was just, I was going through my own issues in my life, and it was just kind of time that I set things aside when it came to cars and, move on to a different thing, which is buying a house, because I'm getting kind of old and that's what I wanted to do, to be honest. And I was pretty much toyless for about a year until finally I ended up getting into a new thing, which is motorcycles. My very first bike was a super clapped out R6. When I first bought it, it was completely naked, had no fairings, had no windscreen, it was clapped. I ended up putting little bits and pieces on it. It's actually the bike that I ended up learning on. And I had it for about a good year and a half. I met a whole bunch of people from riding, and I just within the 2 years of me riding, I fell in love with that, just like the way that I fell in love with the RX-7. If I could actually gauge the same amount of love that I have for it, I probably would say that I love riding as much as I love that RX-7. Now, I got rid of the R6, ended up selling the FD, and I just didn't do anything for about a year. And fast forward to about 2018, I had to go through a lot of bull crap near the end of the year. A good friend of mine ended up committing suicide, and this was all in the month of October. A good friend of mine ended up committing suicide. A friend of mine, Bo Chang, some of you guys might know him if you're from Seattle, ended up dying from complications with his surgery. And the girl that I wanted to be with for a long time ended up just tossing me to the side and kind of forgetting that I was completely there. So 2018 for me was a really tough year. I ended up having to go to therapy because I was pretty close to the point of where I wanted, to commit suicide. It was just, if I felt like if I was going to live this way and things like this that were very important to me were going to get taken away, I just didn't want to be around anymore. It didn't happen until, my family ended up getting with me, which is very weird because my family ended up getting with me and having an intervention with me and asking me what it was that was going on with me and what they can do to help and how can I get past all the crap that I was doing. And honestly, at that point, I was just like, I don't really want to do anything. I just want to let go. And then, I don't know, one night I was just in my bed. I've spent so many days being sad and just not doing anything with my life, missing work and just fucking up, that I finally decided I was just going to go to therapy. And in that sense, I went to therapy for a couple months. And one of the things that my therapist kind of egged me on doing was to find a hobby for myself that would help me not think about all the bad things that were happening in my life. And I was like, hey, maybe, I should get back into riding. So, looking behind me, this is a 2014 BMW S1000RR. This, compared to the FD, is the bike of my dreams. There's no other bike that I could honestly say that I wanted more than this. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are like, I want a Ducati or a Aprilia or R1 or something crazy like that. Nah, I wanted to stick with the S1000RR because it was unique. As you can tell, the lights itself are not the same size. They're a little bit different compared to other bikes out in, the world. I believe these were first released in 2010, the first generation, and it was a bike that actually ended up changing the bike world as we know it because it was one of the bikes that first had electronics on it. This bike right now, I probably got it for a really good deal from a guy that was selling out to the East Coast for the military, and he was like, hey man, I have this bike that I can't take with me. I know you want an S1000, and lo and behold, I was lucky enough to go ahead and get one. So what can I say about the S1000? It's beaten every expectation that I've had for any motorcycle that I've ever wanted. It definitely gets a lot of looks. It gets more guys than it does girls. But it's one of the most comfortable things that I've ever sat on when it comes to motorcycles, because most motorcycles aren't very comfortable. But talking aside from the bike, just a little bit of some things that happened to do with riding and me. Riding is probably one of the biggest things that helped me out getting past all bull crap that I had to go through 2018. I've met a whole ton of friends who deeply care about me that I haven't met so forth in the car community, aside from a few people. And these people I probably consider family now. I don't know, it's just a different feeling than it is for owning a car, because when you're on a bike, it's very dangerous, as everyone can know. Like, every day that I wake up, that I get on my bike, that I have to go to work, or just something simple, I already know that it might be the last day that I ever get on my bike. And that's something that I've just kind of learned to accept, because it's something I just can't give up. It's one of those things that it's a win-lose situation. Which one do you want to take forth? You just don't know what you want to do.